In this video, I upgraded this PocketMod to 36 volts, retained the stock motor. It does 22 miles an hour. A link to all the products is above and also in the description. Now this bike, I added a few extra features. I added LEDs, a tail light, and a halo headlight, along with a variable speed throttle. But before we get started on the build, I hope that you liked this video, subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching. To access the batteries, you're going to simply open the seat and remove these 4 bolts. And there we have access to the batteries. To remove the old batteries, simply disconnect the strap, then disconnect the connector, and then you're going to pull the batteries out like this, and then just simply snip them off and retain this cable. All right, here is my 36 volt 10 amp hour battery. I used the foam that the battery was packed in. I cut it down using a bread knife. I also used some foam to make a platform. I think what I'm going to do is mount the battery like this. It fits in there nice. I can use the factory strap to strap that down in this direction. So it'll be like that. And what I'm going to do is utilize the T connector that came with the battery, and then this is the battery connector from the original batteries. What I'm going to do is tie these together. I like to use these solder and seal connectors. They're weatherproof and waterproof. You simply slide it in and then use a heat gun to melt the solder. If you don't want to use these solder and seal connectors, I highly recommend these lever connectors. They're pretty neat and they're easy to use. It's great for troubleshooting, and you can lock them together so that they stay together like this. And then you're going to simply just put the wire in one side and then drop the lever, and you'll see that it secures. I'm going to do the same thing for the black wire, and then I'm going to match it up with the T connector. So I'm going to make sure that the red wire lines up with the red wire. Slide this in place. Make sure that it's in there, secure. And then I'm going to do the same for the black wire. Get that braided. Slide that in there. Drop that lever. It's nice. Now I have this nice connector and I can test it. So to do so, I'm going to connect it to the factory controller. This is the 24 volt controller with the stock motor. And then I'm going to bring it up here to the battery. And I have that. And then the last thing I'm going to do is connect the switch, and I'm going to turn that on. So I do have power. I'm going to try the throttle. All I hear is clicking, so not sure if the 36 volt is too much power for the 250 watt motor. So now I'm going to try another thing. Disconnect this. Disconnect the battery for safety. I'm going to take this harness off. I have a leftover controller from an MX 650 or an MX 500 or an SX 500 that I built. This is a standard Razer controller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try connecting the stock motor to this 36 volt controller, which I'd like to use anyhow because this throttle is variable. So the first thing I'm going to do is connect the battery cable wire, and then the motor is pretty easy. It connects straight to the motor. And what else do I need here? Oh, the throttle. Put the throttle cable on, and now I'm going to connect the battery. Connect the battery. I do see there's power here, 36 volts, and now I have power with that. Okay, now that I know that works, get everything secured and laid out the way that I want. Here is the wire harness that I made to connect the new battery to the factory switch and then over to the controller. I use these solder and seal connectors. I like them because you can put a wire in each end and then use a heat gun, and it melts the solder and gives a nice weatherproof connection with very little resistance drop, and it's nice and easily done. Now this wire harness, I used the T connector that came with the new battery, the factory battery connector, and then I used some 16 gauge wire for an extension to connect to the factory switch. So looking at the factory switch, one thing I noticed was with 36 volts, it will not illuminate the switch, but it does work. What you want to do is connect the factory, the red wire, using a spade connector, and did that, and then connect that, puts the power up to the switch, and then coming out of the switch you're going to use the bottom spade. Then this will connect over to the controller, and just for testing purposes I'm going to put the voltmeter in here so that you can see the voltage, and we can also make sure that the battery is turned on. And then I'm going to connect the T connector. Okay, so the switch is off. Now I turn it on. You can see the switch no longer illuminates with the higher voltage, but you can see here that the voltage is 41.9 volts. I come over here to my controller. I see that I have power to the controller, and I hear the clicking, so I know that I'm getting power. I can check this with a voltmeter to make sure that the throttle is working properly. So when the throttle's not being activated, it does show 1.5 volts. Now I turn the throttle, you should see it come up. I'm getting 35.8 volts out to the motor. Then you can see it comes back, and then what's nice with this new throttle, it's variable, unlike the stock one that is either on or off. But I can vary the speed of the motor now, so that'll be a great setup. Now that I have this all operational, I'm going to get this all packaged onto the bike. All right, in order to mount the larger 36 volt controller, you can see here that this bottom mount doesn't work very well, and I needed to come up with a mounting platform. So I cut this little wooden block that I had scrap. I used a wood screw and made sure it was countersunk. Same thing over here. That attaches into this cross brace, and then I'm going to use the one bolt here and then put a wood screw on the other side, and now that controller will sit nicely in that position. All right, I got the 36 volt battery installed with the strap. I have the 36 volt controller mounted here. This is the block that I added. I put the step down transformer. I used a zip tie and zip tied it to the center bar. You could always screw it to the center bar if you wanted to by turning it 90 degrees, but all of the wires are here. It'll make it real easy. Everything will be wired in this area here. I know there's a lot of wires and it looks like a daunting task, but there's a lot of extra wires due to the headlight, tail light, LEDs that I ran, and horn. I'll do that in a separate video, but I'm just going to hook up the controller, the new battery, and the throttle and whatnot. So let's start with the easy things. The throttle comes down. It's an easy cable. All of these connections are foolproof. You can't plug them in wrong because they're foolproof, male or female, or have different prongs. Now on this 36 volt controller, I have an additional brake wire for a front brake, but since this bike doesn't have a front brake, I simply taped it off. I also taped off the charge port, and I'm not going to be connecting the charge port because I just don't want to have any issues with someone plugging a 24 volt charger into this controller. I just simply took the wire from the controller and zip tied it back here. It's underneath the plastics. I can easily plug the charger in. Okay, getting back to the wiring or connecting of this bike. You have the motor that comes up here. I'm going to be connecting that to the connector with two wires, this yellow and blue one from the controller. that pops in place like that. And then I'm going to be connecting the power wire from the switch to the controller. So we have that here. All right. So now I have all my connections to this factory 36 volt controller. This here is the 36 volt to 12 volt step down transfer. This here is the 36 volt to 12 volt step down transformer that I'm using for all the LEDs, headlight, tail light, and horn. So the last thing I'm going to do is connect the T connector to the battery. But before I do so, I just want to show you that this is going to the factory on-off switch. One thing you'll note with 36 volts, the factory on-off switch does not illuminate. So I just want to go over what I have here. The red wire comes out of the battery into the T connector, out of the T connector red wire. I didn't have any red wire of the same gauge, and it comes in here to the middle spade on the switch. Then the power comes out of the switch to the bottom spade. So don't use the top spade because it only puts out 29 volts. Down here, I'm getting the full 41 volts. That's a fully charged 36 volt. And it comes out and it comes up here. The red wire comes up and goes into the factory controller. From the factory connector or the old battery connection, I have the black wire that comes out and goes back to the battery. So it's a pretty simple circuit. Now, I chose to add a Y to this so that I can tee in my auxiliaries. This is where the step-down transformer goes. I also have a voltmeter down here, but overall it's pretty easy. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to connect this. This is the T volt. You can see here, I don't have any power to anything. I'm going to turn on the switch. You can see here the on-off switch does not illuminate, but I do see lights on my throttle. Now I have power. Check the motor cutoff switch. Let's see. I'm hitting the switch. Hit the brake. All right, cuts the power. Perfect. Everything looks operational. In this segment of the video, I'm going to attach these optional headlight, tail light, LEDs, and horn. I'm doing so by using this step-down transformer. Now, like I said, this is optional, but it definitely gives a cool look to the bike and gives visibility at night and also allows you to use a horn. To remove the faux headlight, you're going to use a screwdriver. In order to get this halo light to sit flush, I'm using these shears or dikes to cut off the little tabs, and then I can peel back and then double-sided tape here on the headlight like this. All right, I got the halo mounted here. You can see the wires are down in there. I use the two-sided tape on the back. It's sitting on there nice and secure. Now I'm gonna reinstall the globe. Drilled one center hole and two smaller holes to mount this little tail light on here. See, I feed the wires in there, and then that's going to mount nicely like this. Now, I'm going to go step by step. It looks like a daunting task, but using these lever connectors, you can really troubleshoot what goes where. Now, we already talked about how the battery and the switch and the voltmeter is hooked up. Here, it all gets tied in off the switch on position. And then I did a branch over here to the step-down transformer. Going into the step-down transformer, you can see here is the red and black wire. That is for 36 or 48 volts. And then it outputs at 12 volts so it could safely run the headlights and taillights. Now, coming out of the step-down transformer is the yellow and black wire at 12 volts so that it can safely run the headlight, taillights, and horn. Now, that comes into this power block here. So what I'm doing here is this is the power wire or the positive, that's the negative. And I'll go through that. So you can see this comes in, and then you'll see that I attached the red and blue wire. That goes up to the switch that's on the handlebars and provides power through the switch, and then the power comes out, and the green wire, which you see here, goes back to the red wire on the horn and powers the horn. Then out of the horn is a yellow wire, and then I attached it using a butt connector, and that goes all the way back here to the black wire and connects into this junction. You can see there's multiple wires. That's also where all the LEDs and headlights, the black wire, all comes back to this common location. Moving up to the headlight, you have the positive that comes out of the switch. I wrote on this L for lights. It comes in, the power comes in here, and what goes out is the positive for all of the lights, the headlight, the tail light, and all 4 LEDs that I hooked up. So I hope that's not too confusing. You can use this LED, use these lever connectors to troubleshoot. So in conclusion, this build turned out really well. I might smoke the front headlight as it's kind of on the bright side. It would dim that and you'd see a better look from the halo light. I'm not sure how long the stock motor will last. I'll probably end up upgrading to a 500 watt motor. That'll probably get me to 25 miles an hour. But overall, I'm happy with this build. I hope that you liked this video. Subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.